but I was grieving, I was processing, and then I was feeling like a criminal. And it's so much easier to decide that you have a really strong view on this topic when the people that you're talking about are imaginary. They are Christians, they are Muslim, they are atheists, they are everybody. It was not just between the family, their doctor, and their God. It was also between them and the state of Texas. Sorry, I'm gonna cry. That's part of why she also joined the lawsuit. Today we're talking about the Texas lawsuit of people who have joined to sue the state of Texas over the abortion laws that have taken place in the state, and some updates on that case as far as new people who have joined, one of which I know personally and wanted to specifically talk about today. So this was 5 women who were denied care when they needed a termination, and they joined a lawsuit. And a lot of people had been talking about this back when it first happened, which was, 9 months ago. Article is 8 months old, so probably 8 to 12 months ago is when this first happened. They were denied terminations, and all of them have complications that were extremely serious, either lethal anomalies or serious health conditions. And their allegation was that they would have been able to get care if they were somewhere else, but they weren't able to get care because they were in Texas. And for those who don't know, I think most of you know, but I am from Texas. I grew up in rural Texas, did all of my medical school, college, residency training, all in Texas, private practice in Texas. I am Texas born and bred through and through. I didn't move out of Texas until we moved here, basically. So this is very close to my heart, and I understand the system very well there. The current laws, at least at the time of writing this, in Texas that were in effect were threatening doctors with loss of medical license, of hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines that were possible, up to 99 years in jail for providing abortion care. And the people who decided to bring this lawsuit alleged that they did not receive standard adequate medical care because of these laws. The Center for Reproductive Rights is who is in charge of bringing the lawsuit, and it was the first lawsuit that was enacted or that was filed after the Dobbs decision overturned Roe v. Wade. So this is a really robust, interesting lawsuit that has been playing out in Texas basically since the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So the updates on that are this article in the Texas Tribune, which goes over people who have additionally joined. And the reason I want to talk about it today is because I personally know one of the people in this article, and they have a story that I think is both really moving and really unique. When I read the article, she sent it to me and said, hey, look what I did. And I read her story in the Tribune, and I was like in tears, even though I already knew her story because she's a friend. But I want to go over it today because I think she's got a very unique voice. Even amongst all of the people in the lawsuit, she's in a very unique position. This article goes through some of their stories, and I just want to talk about them with you. So Kimberly Manzano is one of the people, and this isn't the person that I know, but she kept getting worse and worse news about the condition of the baby that she was pregnant with. And finally, after long discussions and many weeks of testing and ultrasound, the doctor that she was taking care of said this is not a pregnancy issue or a fetal development that will be compatible with life after delivery. She went to her pastor, and he said, if you believe your doctor to be a godly man, take what the doctor says as clarity from God in your decision. I also think it's fascinating that Manzanos here talked to their pastor, and their pastor supported them in their decision. I don't think you would get that at every church. And I also think that that pastor probably is not publicly supporting the right to choose, which is a problem, right? So we need people speaking up who understand the culture where people learn these things, and who understand, how important it is to not be ostracized and ousted by your religious affiliation for making a choice that you think is best. And I wish that those people would also join this discussion. So her and her husband, who are both very highly religious, decided that the most loving thing that they could do for their son was to terminate the pregnancy. And they say it was a very difficult decision, but they thought that was the best decision for them, and prior to this would have considered themselves anti-abortion. Now, I want to talk about this not because I want to make her look bad. That's not the goal, right? And she's obviously joining this fight now. But I have had this patient in my office more times than I can count, who say to me, last week I would have called someone a murderer for choosing this, and this week I understand. And I think it's so incredibly important to share these stories, because every time I say you don't know what you would do until it's you in that situation, people think, oh, well, I do, because I would never do that. But the truth is, you don't know what you would feel like was the best. And I think this extends even to terminations that are not done for lethal anomalies, but I think lethal anomalies is the best way that we can approach this outlook and this discussion with people who are not even like on the fence. They are like, no, it's murder. Because that's the only time where you see these stories shared publicly about, I was really religious, I was anti-abortion, but then this happened and now I get it. And honestly, for me, that was the beginning of my journey to opposing criminalization of abortion and supporting rights, because I also grew up in that small town Texas where that's what we were taught, right? And I think it's really important that we share these stories without being overly judgmental, for especially people who did not grow up in a place that was overly pro-life, because that, I don't think you can fully get the concept of how hard it is to support reproductive rights as somebody growing up in that environment when that has always been linked to your morality. So if your whole life your morality has been linked to your position on that issue, it's incredibly difficult to unlearn that and then reevaluate what you believe, not just what you were told that you have to believe. Does that make sense? So my process of this was, I never felt really strongly about it. I just knew what my church and my community told me I was supposed to feel about it. And my process of getting to a point where I knew I absolutely 100% supported choice in lethal anomalies was easy. And that's not even easy for I trained with people who wouldn't take care of people who were having an induction for a lethal anomaly. Like, they wouldn't even go in the room with them. I have had more than one patient who the anesthetist and anesthesiologist refused to place an epidural because they didn't agree with the patient having a termination for a lethal anomaly. These are real things that happen. And every time we would have an induction for a lethal anomaly, because we didn't do D&Es. I mean, I wasn't even trained to do D&Es, so it was always induction. And I got to a point where I was like, okay, these people are having the worst day of their life. They had a very wanted pregnancy and have just been given horrible information and had to decide between two really horrible options. One, I continue this pregnancy, which puts me at a higher risk because being pregnant is always more risky than not being pregnant, which makes it more likely I have a complication that could potentially interfere with my ability to have children in the future, which means that I have to go to the grocery store and I'm growing and people can tell I'm pregnant and they'll say, oh, are you having a boy or a girl? And I have to say, it's a boy, but he's going to die when he's born. This is not a position that is enviable. And then the other option they have is I end this pregnancy because I feel like, not everybody, obviously, I don't think anybody should be forced into either of those boxes, but they have to say, okay, I feel like this is the most humane thing. This would be the least suffering for this baby that I care about. And this is what I want to do. So in my head, I'm like, this person had no good choices and they made a choice and I am here to take care of them, and I should never ever be the person who makes somebody's worst day worse. I may not be able to change a situation, and this is kind of my mantra as a doctor, but when I walk into a room, there are always going to be things that I can't change. I can't change if somebody has cancer. I can't change if somebody has a stillborn baby. I can't change lethal anomalies, but I am never to be the one who walks out of that room having made somebody's worst day even worse. That was easy for me to get to that place, even though I grew up kind of in this pro-life bubble. Getting to a place where I, in my head, would, and to people I knew, say I am against criminalization, period, was not that hard, but getting to a place where I could talk about it on the internet was much harder. And the reason for that is that it's not always very safe to do when you are a doctor in the political and religious environment of somewhere like small town Texas. I didn't always feel like it was safe for me to talk about it, especially having a fairly public image on the internet, because I didn't know if that would make somebody, lash out and do something crazy, right? Hopefully that wouldn't be the case, but it was always in the back of my head, and it took me a long time to get there. But the relative safety of me having left private practice made it easier for me to talk about online. And there weren't a lot of us online as OB-GYNs talking about this. Like, I've been online as MDJ since 2017, and I don't think until our little group of OB-GYNs really started talking about Jen Gunter always has. She's always been a voice for this, but I don't think it always was very many people. Anyway, I had to get to a point where I was comfortable talking about what I felt, and I think talking about it made me also able to tease out how I actually felt about it, and I got more and more comfortable because I have seen these people in real life. I have sat and held their hands, not just people with lethal anomalies, not just people with extreme maternal conditions, everybody. And I hear their stories as people. I see them as people. And it's so much easier to decide that you have a really strong view on this topic when the people that you're talking about are imaginary. But in reality, the people that you're talking about when you talk about termination are your friends and family and neighbors. And they are Christians, they are Muslim, they are atheists, they are moms, they're single, they are teenagers, everybody, right? And it's so easy to dehumanize people when you speak in abstracts. And it's so easy to take a really strong stance against things when they're not real to you. But I like the way the Tribune is presenting this topic as individual stories, because I think that's the only way that you actually change somebody's mind. They go on to say now that decision is something they have to make. It was not just between the family, their doctor, and their religious council and their God. It was also between them and the state of Texas. And although they knew that continuing the pregnancy would put them at greater risk for things like infection and illness, the patient's life was not actively in danger, which is something we've talked about. How at risk do you have to be? Because you are always at higher risk of everything bad that can happen to you while you are pregnant as compared to while you are not. So where's the cutoff of when that becomes something that is acceptable to intervene on? And that's an issue with any of these laws. So they couldn't find someone who would be able to do the termination in Texas for fear of being charged and going to prison. She and her husband went to New Mexico. Her doctor refused to send her medical records to the clinic because she was, I guess, afraid or opposed, I'm not sure, and required her to serve as the go-between. I'm not sure what that exactly means, but I was grieving, I was processing, and then I was feeling like a criminal. And that is the crux of all of these, is I had the worst thing that I could imagine going on. And on top of that, I was made to feel like I couldn't trust my medical team. And on top of that, I couldn't get the care I needed. And on top of that, now that I'm trying to advocate for myself and get the care I need, I feel like I am committing a crime. They joined the court case. That means that the total number of people in this case are at 22 now. They all alleged that they were denied care in Texas for medically complex pregnancies, including cases where the fetus was not expected to survive after birth. The Center for Reproductive Rights filed this lawsuit and have claimed that the near total ban on abortion in Texas violates their rights under the Texas Constitution. In July, they had a very emotional hearing. At some point, we can watch the hearing. It's hard to watch. It's very emotionally draining. And the Travis County judge, so Travis County is where Austin is. I'm sure they intentionally brought this in Austin, hoping that they would get a liberal-leaning judge. He granted a temporary injunction, which allowed for doctors who were acting in good faith judgment to terminate complicated pregnancies. The Texas Office of the Attorney General immediately appealed that ruling, which is just like, how disgusting, right? You have an injunction that says good faith judgment of a doctor will allow them to provide care for people, and the judge immediately appeals it and puts it on hold until it goes to the Texas Supreme Court, which will be later this month or next month. They argue here that this causes harm to pregnant women, and I would agree. And Manzano's experience, she says, has changed her mind about abortion, and she's sharing her story in hopes of educating people who don't realize how restrictive the abortion ban is. She says, I think I was really naive, thinking the world was one way, and going through this and seeing it's not like that. In the end, God knows my heart. He knows why I've been through this, and I'll have to stand before him one day and no one else. I just wish people could get there before they have to go through this themselves. Now we'll talk about Dani Matheson. This is Dani, and I know her personally. She was a medical student when this happened, and she's now an OBGYN resident, and was very excited to get pregnant and have a baby during her 4th year of medical school, which is exactly what I did. And that's very common for medical students to, if they want to have a baby, try to have a baby during 4th year, because that's a time where you have a little bit easier schedule. And Dani had always wanted to be an OBGYN, I guess, since she did her rotation in med school. And she also wanted to be a mother, which is pretty common for, I don't know, women of that age. Her aunt is a player in this story who is also an OBGYN. So her doctor is also her aunt, and I know her as well. They go through a little bit of Dani's story here. She met her husband when they were in high school in Fort Worth. They got married in 2019. They tried to time the pregnancy to be delivering during 4th year, as I was just saying, and they were really excited. She says, so thrilled, in fact, that her husband passed out at the first ultrasound appointment, which is adorable. I mean, adorable knowing that he was okay. So he heard the heartbeat and passions of fatherhood overtook him, she said, only half kidding. She went in for her 18-week anatomy scan, and she had just finished a rotation where she was learning how to do ultrasound. And so when they put the ultrasound on, she immediately knew that something wasn't right. And she says it felt like an out-of-body experience. And she just kept thinking, no, like the images that I'm seeing must be from somebody else. This can't possibly be what I'm seeing on the screen, which is a very common feeling when something terrible is happening. They go on to talk about her coming from a family of doctors, including her aunt, who is her OBGYN. And Dani texted her from the exam room and said, is something wrong? And her aunt said yes. So Matheson's daughter had a laundry list of diagnoses: a malformed brain, something wrong with the heart, a hole at the bottom of the spine, only one kidney, barely in the first percentile for weight. And Dani kind of recounts this as, it just kept getting worse. Like everything that they kept saying, it just kept getting worse. And that appointment was in September of 2021, which was right after the 6-week ban went into effect in Texas. And that law allowed you to be sued by anyone who was not happy that you were having a termination. That was before the Dobbs decision overturned Roe, so they couldn't enforce it as they can now, like a federal or like a government, like the government couldn't step in and penalize people for having an abortion, but you could allow a civil lawsuit to be brought against the doctor or the nurse or the person who drove you to the clinic or anyone who talked to you about it and told you how to access it. And so you basically aiding and abetting someone in accessing a termination could land you in many lawsuits. She has this unique position, right, where she understands what her doctor, who is also her aunt, is navigating, because she's had these conversations with patients as well, and she understands the legal issues. But then on the other side, she's now the patient, and she's having to navigate this having happened to you as a person. And I just think that's such a rare and unique voice to have in this discussion. And I'm really happy that she chose to share her story in the Tribune and to join the lawsuit, because I think it's important. So she says, we had to have the most legal conversation that we could. And that conversation kind of went like, I'm sorry, I can't help you here. Maybe someone in another state could. And Dani obviously knew what she meant. So they went home, obviously, absolutely devastated. And her mom, Dani's mom, who's also a doctor, started helping her call clinics until she found one in New Mexico that had specifically put aside spots for Texans. And they bought tickets immediately, and less than 24 hours after they had gone to that ultrasound appointment, they were on their way to Albuquerque. Several people on the flight, she says, assumed they were going to Albuquerque for their honeymoon, and they said that was a fiction that they leaned into even after they returned to Texas, meaning it's what people thought we were doing. And we just told them, yep, that's what we're doing, because they didn't know who it would be safe to tell that this happened, because they could still get in trouble. Her husband could get in trouble. Her doctor could get in trouble. Friends, family, anyone around her could get in trouble. They had COVID protocols in place, so Mathis and Dani had to go by herself. And there were journals, she said, from other people who had been there encouraging her. And she says there were messages of support. You're making the right decision. You're doing the best you can with the information that you have, which that one just like hit me right in the heart, because that's something we always say on my channel, right? Is like, we're doing the best we can with the information that we have. Let's see, on the flight back, is she finishing up her residency applications, and she says she had always wanted to practice medicine in Texas, like the rest of her family did. Part of her was relieved to find out that when she eventually did get into residency, she was going to Hawaii, and she says she felt very let down by Texas, and she still feels very let down by Texas. It makes her mad and sad and angry and guilty, because she knows there's people in Texas that need care, and she knows how to provide it, and she can't give it to them. And I think that's also really moving too, right? Because everybody in Texas doesn't have the ability to get this diagnosis and then fly to New Mexico. You may be in a family where that's not safe for you to do. You may not have the finances to do that. You may not be able to take off work, especially without being able to have a doctor's note that says you have to go somewhere or that you're sick. It's nearly impossible for a large percentage of people to just drop everything and leave Texas. And for those who are not in the US, Texas is massive. This is not like I just drive an hour and I'm in a new state. You could drive for 8-10 hours and still not leave the state of Texas sometimes. This isn't an easy thing to just hop to another state and get done. Not to mention, she's in this position of relative privilege to everybody else. She understands the medical system. She understands the legal framework and current culture of legality for abortion in Texas and around the US. She has access to things that a lot of people don't have access to, as far as an understanding of what needs to be done, how to get that done, how to find people that can safely do that. In Hawaii, when she encounters patients who are facing similar diagnoses, she can offer them now the option that she was not able to access in her own home state, which was to terminate the pregnancy in the doctor's office or hospital, depending on their gestational age. And, they can do that when they feel ready to make that decision. So she says, and I'll just read her own quote here, "I say to them, your heart can want one thing and your brain can know this is still the right thing to do," she said. "Your mama heart wants to hold your baby. I want to hold my daughter. I still do. But my brain knows this was the right thing to do." And Dani is pregnant again, and with a little girl. She hopes that she can finish residency and come back to Texas at some point, work as an OBGYN, and raise her daughter surrounded by the strong female doctors who made her who she is. And sorry, I'm going to cry. That's part of why she also joined the lawsuit. So anyway, she says, "If I can provide a voice or perspective or a story that resonates with one lawmaker that gets them to change their mind, then I want that to happen. I want this to happen to one less Texan." So we don't have to finish the whole article. It's in the Texas Tribune if you'd like to read it. There are more very moving stories and legal framework discussions there. But when Dani told me that she had joined the lawsuit, I wanted to talk about it here.